Hi everyone, I'm Ben Gonzalez and this is TDI. Today we're talking about the aftermath of the winter storms and now the claims process that many people are going through. Joining us today is Scott Helmkamp. He's one of the managers in our consumer service program. Hi Scott.
Hi, Ben.
So we wanted to answer some of the questions that we're seeing a lot in our TDI helpline as well as our email. Starting with the most common one, how do insurance companies handle broken pipes from the freeze?
Great question, Ben. And certainly, like you said, it's one we're getting a lot of. Due to the widespread nature of this, many homes in Texas were affected. And it's important to know that not all policies are going to have the same type of coverage. So if you ever have a question about whether or not something is covered, you definitely want to call your agent and your company and have a conversation about what your policy will and won't do for you. That said, when it comes to pipe damage and water damage from pipes, insurance companies are generally going to cover losses related to sudden, unexpected outbursts of water from a broken pipe. Slow leak that's gone unmaintained by the homeowner, that's a different situation. But for an event like this, sudden burst pipes and the water that's going to come from those, that should be covered.
Okay, so if there's a lot of damage that has to be repaired and I can't stay in my house, is food and a hotel going to be covered by my insurance?
It should be, yes. That's a type of coverage called additional living expenses. It's what covers those costs of living that you have to pay for above and beyond your normal daily living expenses because you not in your home. If you have to pay for restaurants, hotel lodging, laundromat services, etc., those are all things that ALE or additional living expenses can cover.
I never remember that about the laundromat. That's a good point. And we know a lot of people lost food in their freezers and refrigerators because of some extended power outages. Can I make a claim just for spoiled food?
That will depend on the policy again. It is possible if your coverage will allow for spoiled food to be replaced after a power outage, depending upon where that power outage occurred on your property or offsite. You could have that paid for without having to cover a deductible on the policy. Again, you want to talk to your insurance company or your agent to get exact coverage details if you're ever unsure about that.
Right. It always depends on the language of your policy. Another issue that was common during the storms was trees being downed. And if a tree fell from my neighbor's yard onto my house, whose insurance company pays in those situations?
Generally speaking, if you're looking at a tree falling, you want to see where it lands, not where it grows. Even if it grows on the neighbor's yard, but a weather event causes it to fall down and damage your property, you need to look to your insurance to cover that. If it's damaging your home, your homeowner's insurance should pay for that, including debris removal. Because if something's damaging your property, obviously there's a physical object that's helped participate in that. So that tree, your company can help pay to cut it up and remove it, as well as covering the damage. Similarly, if it strikes your auto
Wow.
insurance should be able to help cover you for that loss rather than your homeowners. But it's all about damage that you experience based on that tree falling on your property. I'll give you another example where that might not be covered. If the tree falls and lands in your yard without damaging anything, it
Hmm.
may be an unsightly mess, but without that damage to property element of the claim, a company may not even be willing to come out and cut it up and remove the tree. It's got to cause damage to your property.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, Typically, when we hear from consumers, they're having a problem. So they're often asking, what are my options if the claim is being denied or I don't think they're paying enough, my insurance isn't paying enough? What do we tell people in those situations?
When somebody calls into the consumer helpline with that kind of a problem, we're first and foremost going to tell them that it's a good idea to ask the company to reconsider the decision. There's all manner of extenuating circumstances and weird situations that occurred with this storm because it was so widespread across the state. Many things may not have been under your control, like whether or not you had power to keep your pipes warm, whether or not you could safely go outside to turn the water main off to prevent damage to the pipes. So if a company is going to give you a denial decision, first things first, go back and ask for a reconsideration. Alternately, you may want to file a complaint with TDI so that we can get involved and check to see if the company's following their policy, what they're supposed to do for you. That's if you get a claim denial. Mm-hmm. Maybe the company tells you that they'll pay your claim, but you disagree on the amount of the loss, maybe the scope of the loss. That's where there's a couple of other options that you have, one of which is appraisal. That's a right that you generally have in your policy that lets you present evidence to the company about the value of your loss, receipts, estimates from professional appraisers. That kind of thing can help the company reconsider whether or not they're paying you enough money for your loss. Alternately, there's a type of licensed professional called a public insurance adjuster. That's somebody that represents you when working with the insurance company to help settle a claim. It's not somebody that works for the company, and that may be an option for consumers to consider if they're having trouble negotiating their own claims.
Okay. And finally, if I have some losses on my property that are just not covered by insurance, any options for me there?
Thankfully, there is. It is true that there may be policyholders out there that aren't covered for this loss, either because the policy they have is not an all-peril policy that covers this kind of loss. Maybe, unfortunately, the policy's lapsed. But if you find yourself completely uninsured for a loss related to this storm, you may be able to apply for disaster assistance from FEMA. You'd have to go through their application process, but we can certainly help point people in that direction if we're not able to assist.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Lots of good information there. We have more info about the claims process in particular, maybe even how to file a complaint, or even tips about choosing a contractor on our website at tdi.texas.gov. And if you have a specific question, you can always call the helpline that we talked about. That number is 800-252-3439. And we've got people there to take questions during working hours in the week. So for Scott Helmkamp, I'm Ben Gonzalez, and this is TDI.